Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host amazing guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and MarTech. I'm Jeremy Goldman, Senior Director of Client Briefings at eMarketer, and today we will be learning strategies for successfully integrating AI to produce high-quality, personalized content at scale while maintaining brand integrity and operational efficiency. I'm joined now by my special guest from Adobe, Aloke Fernandes, Director of Paid Media Center of Excellence, Dana Zellers, Senior Director of Lifecycle Marketing, and Luiz Maykot, Senior Gen AI Strategist for Adobe's Gen Studio team. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Alok, Dana, and Louise have a great presentation for you, and afterwards we will open it up for any questions you might have for the group. So just use that chat window to submit questions for the Q&A at any time and to communicate with your peers. So with that, Louise, let's get started.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hello, everyone. So we are here to talk to you guys about how Adobe has leveraged generative AI to scale content production. And according to the research that we have done, obviously content is very important for marketing teams, and it is a big driver of incremental sales. According to the research we did, it drives 49% of incremental sales. So I think we all understand that content is very important to drive ROI. And it does that in multiple different ways, right? One of them is by allowing you to create and serve to your customers highly personalized content, which is very important. Personalization at scale is something that we've all been talking about for a very long time. And if you think about a channel like Meta, for example, right? Meta recommends that for every single campaign you create, you should create at least 8 to 10 variations of your ad, right? So that their algorithm can then serve the right experience to the right customer, right? If you only provide Meta with one version, then it only has one version, it has to serve everyone with the same thing. But for that particular channel, you can think about the scale that you need right there. But it's not only that, you can't just do that once and let that ad or those 10 versions be in market for not even months these days, right? Like your customers will get really tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. So you need to be constantly refreshing those 8 to 10 versions so that the platform has fresh content to show to your customers. And then I've been only speaking about Meta, but the third way is obviously if you have enough content, you can meet your customers at all these different channels, right? Not only Meta, but other social channels, display, email, whatever other marketing channels. And that's the way that that content helps drive ROI. However, according to our research, 59% of marketing teams say that their creative teams and their agencies can't really meet the demand, right? That of content that they have. It is a really, really, really large content demand. I honestly think that we might not ever meet all of it, right? However, when generative AI came about, we at Adobe, our marketing organization, of which me, Dana, and Alok are part of, we saw a great opportunity to leverage generative AI in our marketing operations, particularly on the content creation part of it. And in collaboration between our global marketing organization and our product organization, we created this product called Adobe Gen Studio for Performance Marketing, which is a generative AI first application that enables organizations to create on-brand, personalized, and high-performing content across channels. And what we're going to tell you here is the story of how we have adapted our organization to be able to leverage this generative AI tool to create content in marketing. So first, let me tell you guys a little bit about our marketing organization at Adobe. So it's called GMO, Adobe's Global Marketing Organization. We have more than 1,000 employees. We have a very large annual marketing budget. We serve campaigns across multiple channels, multiple markets. We serve many different types of audiences, right? We are a company that has creative products that serve students all the way to creative pros. We have enterprise products, right? We have a very diverse portfolio of products and also audiences. We operate across more than 26 languages. And as an example, Dana's team, they send roughly 1 billion emails a year, right? Which is a lot of emails. So we have a very large customer base that we need to keep in touch with through marketing. And as most other marketing organizations, we have had a lot of content needs that we couldn't quite meet, right? And some use cases that were hard for us to fulfill, to get to, because we lack content. So generative AI has allowed us to finally be able to address some of these use cases. So I'll list some of them for you guys here. So one of them is testing, right? Everyone knows that, you know, if you are a, you know, world-class marketing organization, you should never have one version of anything, right? You should have multiple different versions and then use these amazing algorithms that can optimize which one the customers prefer best and serve them the right one, right? However, even though these algorithms and the technology has existed, I feel like the technology for that was way ahead of our capacity to create enough content to feed those engines, right? But now with more content creation, with scaling content creation, we can do more testing for paid social, for email, for any channel. The other thing is real-time responsiveness. What happened to us before was, you know, something would happen in the world and we wanted to react, right? We wanted to be like, well, it would be awesome if we could do a campaign speaking to this topic, right? But the problem is that the lead time that we've had for content before was so large, it was like 2, 3, 4 weeks. Then by the time we got the content back, the event we're trying to respond to was over already, right? So we couldn't really respond quickly enough to these events. And now, because we can create content faster, then we can. The other thing too is refresh and reuse content that was previously created. You know, organizations like ours, you know, we create a ton of content. We have a very large library in our dam of previously created assets, but it was still really hard to reuse them because, you know, you still had to go through the exact same process in the exact same, you know, workflow. That still took a long time. So we had this like treasure trove of amazing assets that was really hard to reuse. But now with generative AI, you can take, say, a hero image from that performed really well in the past. You can update the copy, right, and put it into market. So it's making us a lot more efficient with the assets that we had before. The other thing is, again, I think like most organizations, especially organizations that are headquarters in the United States, like our regions, really struggled with creating content, and generative AI has allowed us to allow them really to be more self-serve and to start the content creation by themselves on their own, right, without needing to rely so much on, you know, our main our sort of headquarters. And the other two use cases I want to talk about, which are the ones Dana and Alok are going to mention, is one was the one that I would think is more applicable to Dana's team, which is, you know, allows marketers to create new and unique content for untapped audiences. And like I said, Adobe, we have a lot of different audiences that we want to serve, but in the past, it was difficult to be able to serve them because, again, content creation was hard. So you had to basically create a piece of content and give it to like 4 different audiences when they really needed 4 different pieces of content, right? And then the other one, which Alok will talk about, is you know, bringing analytics into the creation process. These new generative AI algorithms have allowed us to really expand our analytics of our assets and allow us to now make much more informed decisions, and that's what they will talk about. So, Dana, why don't you tell us about a little bit about your use case?
Great. Yeah, so on the lifecycle team, we definitely don't have enough on-brand content to meet our email deployment needs. And the content can be complete emails or fragments like subject lines, pre-headers, headlines that we may want to use for testing. And we really see Gen AI as the biggest opportunity to close the content gap that we have. And we deploy hundreds of batched emails every month worldwide. We have thousands and thousands of triggered emails live that don't get refreshed as often as they should, and more than 50 marketing managers who are working to put programs in market. So we definitely have an opportunity here. So quite a while ago, we started piloting Gen AI technology to try and help us create more content, but we knew that to fully realize the opportunity, we had to adopt it in a more significant way. So we did shift one team, our North America acquisition team, to create through Gen AI technology all of the batched email content that they need. So we've made that transition.
Thank you, Dana. Yeah, I've said this many times to you. I think it's really incredible, right, that your team has done that, that we have a very important email program in our organization, like the North America acquisition, like that is a big deal. You do not want to mess that up, right? And 100% of their emails are now being created with generative AI. I think that is incredible. I think a lot of
Huge.
companies are experimenting, right, with generative AI, running the little pilots, but like we are way past that, right? Like we're that's what scale looks like, and there's more scaling that we'll do. But I think just that by itself is already a pretty big, very significant accomplishment. So that's
Absolutely.
amazing. Yeah. All right, look, can you tell us about your main use case?
Yeah, so my use case is very different from Dana's, but it's another use case for generative AI, so it's really exciting. I'll talk to you a little bit about how we use it from the insights and analytics perspective, and it's all about this workflow from insights to create, right? Like, what are the insights that we're generating from these creatives that can help us create the next piece of content that will actually perform for us? So what we found was a way to use generative AI to actually tag all of these assets, right? Like this is one of the hardest things in analytics is what are the things in the creative that are actually driving your performance? It's been a really hard nut to crack. And that's where we're using generative AI in a very interesting way. What we do is we tag all of the piece of creative, display ads, Facebook ads, the content, the images, the videos, all of that, and do what we call as an attribute, like tag it with an attribute. And the attribute can include things like what are the color in the image, what are the foreground colors, what are the background colors, what are the objects in the image. And then we can take all of those attributes and understand which of those attributes are actually driving strong performance, right? And strong performance could be high engagement rates or like click-through rates or a low CPA, right? Like what are the best performing attributes? And from this, that can then drive new hypotheses for what we want to test. In this particular example, what we found was something like a black foreground color kept coming up as one of the strongest performers. And then we quickly realized that the black foreground color just meant that the product expressions in the image was what was performing. And product expressions essentially in the ad, it's that black foreground thing that's showing you what you can achieve in Lightroom or Photoshop, any one of the Adobe products, right? And so we tested that side by side, that developed the hypothesis, and we found that having an ad that had that product expression drove 40% higher revenue. And that's an incredible insight that we can now leverage across all of our ads. And so generative AI gives us those insights and at scale of insights that we've never had before.
Yeah. Thank you, Alok. Yes, I think that is incredible. Like as a recovering data scientist, I think that this is just an incredible unlock for us, right? And that your team is leveraging, and that I know you speak to us a little bit more later as well in the presentation, a little bit more in depth. So thank you. So yes, everyone. So now that I think we've kind of set the stage to tell you, why we're here, right? What has Adobe done in the last year that we're here to give you advice on? So this is the things that I think we want to focus on, right? Which is what are the changes that we've had to make at Adobe when it comes to people, when it comes to processes, and when it comes to technology, right? To really unlock the power of generative AI. So we will start talking about people, and we'll start with Dana telling us a little bit about some of the things we've had to do there.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few of the roles that are outside of the lifecycle marketing team that were really instrumental in helping us make this shift. So one are, is having a Gen AI lead, someone who's really excited about the technology, who's an expert level in the technology, who's there to shepherd our new users and drive excitement and alignment across teams. On our creative team, they had to create new roles who specialize in applying brand expertise within the tool. And that was totally new for us. On the agency partner side, they had to shift from the upfront design and copywriting to providing creative oversight through the tool and in the final review and approval step. So they had to shift their roles slightly. And within the the lifecycle team, we really embrace this role of modern marketer, and that's someone who's really effective at delivering ROI today, but they're also able to develop new skills that are needed for Gen AI, like prompt writing, and they're really excited by change, and they're very, very comfortable with ambiguity. So the key was really like finding those modern marketers. And if you think about it, prior to Gen AI, for us, all of the lifecycle marketing managers briefed content. But when we made the shift to Gen AI, we created this smaller team of modern marketers to focus on content creation so we could move as quickly as possible with a really high level of excitement and energy around it. And this core group of marketers are now advocates within the team, which is really essential for us to drive the global adoption we need to do. And this is one of the lifecycle marketing early adopters. And I just want to point out, she's able to inspire and lead other team members on this AI journey. So it's really incredible.
Awesome. Those are very exciting use cases, Dana. I think one of the things we had to do in order to enable this was train these people, right? These are not people who are used to train content. We're talking about modern marketers. On my team, I have analysts that are actually in the squads that are generating content. And so the first thing you need to do is train them. So Louise and team have trained everyone on like how to write prompts, what are the best practices there. And then we have AI centers of excellence that essentially help us understand with our creative teams what are best practices for the outcome, right? What creative is on brand, what creative is not on brand, and establishing those guardrails, establishing those training guidelines really helps enable all marketers and all teams to work cross-functionally to create the best content that's on brand. Okay, so how did we achieve this? I think all of it starts with executive buy-in. Without your leadership being bought into this process, this is a huge change journey. Without that, I don't think you'll get as far as Adobe has gotten. I think at Adobe, we've been very fortunate that our leadership has been bought into generative AI from the start. Adobe obviously has generative AI in all of its products across our digital media and digital experience suites. And so we've been blessed by that. The second thing is we need a very tight collaboration between marketing and creative teams, right? If you think of the old ways, marketers would brief content, creative would create content, but we're blurring those lines, right? Because everyone can create content, and then we have to figure out like what content is actually on brand and not on brand, right? So I think that blurring those lines means you need a very, very strong partnership with your brand and your creative teams, and we've been very successful at doing that here at Adobe. The third thing is tighter collaboration across all of these teams. Where we talk a little bit about, building these small teams that are enabled to move quickly. Those teams consist of everyone from data scientists, analysts, marketers, creative people. So all of those people need to be enabled to move quickly. And then these teams then become the advocates for how we scale using generative AI across all of the teams. So that's been an incredible culture shift.
Thank you, Alok. Yeah, it really has. And I was there from the beginning, and the very first meeting we had at Adobe internally to discuss this, it included people from our aisle, right, our side of the aisle, which was like the marketers, right? So people from Dana's teams particularly. But then we were right there with our creative team, right? So it's a very, very important. There is a shift in culture, that an alliance that didn't exist before that needs to happen here, but it's a very productive one. Now we've talked about some of the changes we've had to do in terms of people, in terms of new roles, new skills, new culture, right? So now we'll move into talking about some processes that we've had to change, how we change them, so forth and so on. So we'll start with Dana.
Great. Yeah. So when we started down this journey, we knew we would have to change our process around content creation, it's super important and critical as you try to scale across the globe. So the first thing we do is make sure we understand our current content process, including time to market, and that is how many days does it take to go end to end through that workflow, and time on task, which is how much time do individuals actually spend on the tasks of the workflow. And we always have this approach when we're looking at processes of, adding new technology, it shouldn't take us longer. So we use both time to market and time on task to guide us as we're looking at it. So the next thing we did is we wanted to, with that core group of marketers who were using the tool, we created a new process map. And we started benchmarking the tasks and the timing by role. And this is an interesting process because the work actually shifted. The marketers are creating first, and then the agency is reviewing and approving at the end. But at the end of the day, when we benchmarked this new process and moved stuff around, we had huge, huge efficiency gains. We reduced our time to market from 3 weeks to less than 1 week. And that is super, super significant. We're going to continue to work on efficiency. And next, though, we're going to dive into that review and approval step, which was the biggest change for us. So, to scale, and again, I mentioned this earlier, agency partners really needed to change how they worked to focusing on reviewing and approving the content created by marketers. And they really need to make sure we're on brand, and it's the final step. So in our original content creation workflow, there were multiple rounds of manual reviews and approvals, but in the new workflow, the review and approval step happens efficiently in the tool in one step, right after the marketer creates the content. And this was, admittedly a big change for our agency, and it took some time to work through them. But changes to this step are what actually helped us reduce that time to market.
Thank you, Dana. Really, I think it's really, really great how you guys changed the relationship with the agency. The agency is still there because we've scaled content creation. Your team is scaling content creation to a degree that, we certainly still need our agency partners, but they're now just moving into reviewing and approving these assets, right? Instead of like the creation, starting with the creation. It's been really interesting to see. So another process that we have created, that we have to create and maintain at Adobe is related to what we call brand guardrails, right? So going back to that very first meeting that I remember having at Adobe between our marketing team and our studio team, and we said, okay, we want to leverage generative AI for content creation. The very first question, obviously, that we got asked is, can generative AI like replicate the Adobe tone of voice? Can generative AI replicate an Adobe image, right? And we, at the very meeting, we obviously made the decision, and we knew this from the get-go. Our brand is our most valuable asset, right? And we cannot let quality slip. So the brand has been kept at the center of every single conversation, every single product decision that we make has been right there. So the generative AI tool that we use, which is Generative for Performance Marketing, its foundation is the brand, right? And we created a role, like Dana was saying, there's a new role, which this person, she owns the brand. So basically she took our brand guide, she input all the guidelines related to our brand into the tool. And she is the person that maintains that brand, right? So she's always ensuring that that is accurate, that is updated, and that represents our brand, so that all the content that generative AI is producing for us, both for copy and for images, is on brand. But there's also an ongoing step, right? Which, like Dana was saying, which is the review and approval process, right? So let's say someone in Dana's team creates an email, right? They create an email, 1 or 2 versions or 4 versions, whatever many versions they need in Generative for Performance Marketing. So then that they trigger a review and approval. That goes to a creative, right? Either in an agency, like Dana was saying, or one of our internal creatives. And then they will review that, right? And if they realize like, oh man, like it keeps repeating this word, or this is not in our voice and tone, or right, or this image doesn't follow our guidelines, then they have ownership over, like, going back to the person who owns the brand, right, and saying, hey, like, I think we should maybe emphasize this in the brand guidelines more, right? So there's a loop between what's being created and reviewed and evaluated and the brand, right? So now our brand now doesn't only live in our brand book anymore. It's there, it's gorgeous, but it also lives in our generative AI tool. And we have a process now to make sure that that is representative of what's in the brand book. So that's very important for us. Now, Alok, can you tell us about again about our analytics piece there?
Yeah, so the process I talked about a little bit at the beginning was the insight to create, but to measure the full circle of how we measure the upside from generative AI, it's actually insights to create to then measure the outcomes, right? I talked a little bit about the insights piece, which starts essentially with intelligent tagging, right? We use generative AI to tag these creatives. What is in the creative that's actually driving the upside? From that, we have the insights that we use for creative workflows, right? Whether that's Dana using it for generating new emails, or we use it on the paid media side to generate the next set of ads, right? But that's not the end of it, right? What we want to do is then measure the outcomes. Once we launch these generative AI-driven ads, we want to measure like how much upside did that provide us, and use that back into the insights that whole workflow. What we do is we measure the upside on terms of the ROI from this generative AI creative, and we measure all of that as part of what we call a creative efficiency layer. So we know every quarter what is the upside being driven by generative AI creators for paid media, which is an incredible way to measure and talk to leadership about what upside generative AI is actually driving for your business.
Yes, thank you, Alok. I think, yeah, like I said before, I think that's really incredible. I think the fact that, at Adobe, we have a very Alok's team, they manage what I consider to be like world class. I think everyone that does like media measurement, right? So we know down to the pennies, like what's going on, what's driving the higher ROI and all of that. I think it's incredible that now we have, and I know we manage those through layers, right? There's this layer, and now the fact that we have a layer that is related to this process is, in my opinion, like incredible. And one thing that I always mention, Alok, when I'm with you is I think it is going back to like new roles and new skills and culture, right? So Alok's team, they're primarily a team of like data scientists, data analysts. But now because of this, we call this this insights to create motion. We have, people in his team who are like data scientists, but they've become quite proficient in like prompt writing for images, for example, and for copy as well in Gen Studio, and they are like also creating content. Like actually on the slide that Alok presented earlier with the portal, that image was actually an on-brand image created by someone in Alok's team, like a data scientist, right? So it's been very transformative in multiple different ways. I think people are now doing things that, maybe even a year and a half ago, a year before ago, they didn't imagine. But I think a lot of people have a proclivity for these creative things. And once you sort of can put some guardrails around and they feel comfortable that they're not gonna like mess up in a big way, then they're like, yeah, like actually I love doing this. So I think it's been quite interesting to observe that. That's very cool. Um, so the last topic we wanted to talk to you guys about is technology, right? And we've sort of mentioned some about our processes and, we've mentioned, I think, in passing, but I think Dana wants to talk to us a little bit about the importance of integrations here.
Absolutely. And I think that integrating Gen AI tools into your tech stack can unlock even more scale. And that's how we're thinking about it. So first, I'd say every situation is unique, though. Every company is unique. But we do have similar considerations for any new technology. And our approach here is to really identify the integrations that will either increase personalization, save time, reduce errors, or give us some other benefit that we can measure. So again, we start with knowing our end-to-end processes and really understanding how that new technology or tool fits in with our existing workflows and tools. And then as we identify those connection points between the tools and platforms, we start quantifying the benefit of potential integrations, and we use that to prioritize. So our example, our next integration that's on our roadmap right now, um, we discovered if we could publish directly from our Gen AI tool into our existing DAM, we would improve the time to market of our execution processes by 40%. So that's significant, and that's how we're approaching it today.
That's that's awesome, Dana. That's awesome. I mean, the fact that we have moved email content creation, right, from 3 weeks to what you've said has been less than a week. Sometimes it's days. And the fact that we can go even further, like with further integration, I think it's awesome, and we're gonna make it happen. It's gonna
Absolutely.
happen. Yes. So so we wanted to kind of wrap this up, right? With what for us, what has been our path to success, right? Just like a bit of like a roadmap of if you guys are starting this journey today or you are in the middle of it, we wanted to kind of share what ours was. And we think this is a recipe that a lot of companies could and should follow, right? So I would say our first step is, we identified a team of generative AI champions, right? And honestly, this person who was my previous boss, like I said, I was a machine learning engineer. He was my boss, and he was super excited about generative AI, and he was like, "We need to do this. Like, we are in marketing. We have a huge content creation problem. We need to leverage generative AI to help us on content creation." And he was like, he rallied everybody. If any roadblock came up, like he would, work with our leadership, with our executive team to kind of unblock things and move things around. It's very important. You need someone that's passionate, that has sort of responsibility and also some authority to do that, right? And then the other thing we did is, we assembled a team of marketers because right off the bat, we knew that this had potential that we could empower our marketers. So we started with the team of marketers. Actually, we started with people in Dana's team. So we started with email. And again, like Dana was saying, we started with the marketers that were like, very high performing, but also had a little bit of proclivity for creativity and also were like very comfortable with change, right? And Sushmitha was one of them, the one that Dana mentioned. It's been a pleasure working together. So we started with like a small team of focused marketers there, and we're working very closely with them. And also, we started with a team from our studio team, and this has been really incredibly important for our success, which was at Adobe when we went to our studio team and we said, "Hey, we want to start leveraging generative AI." They were very supportive. They're like, "Yes, let's collaborate. Let's work on this together," right? And then what they did was they gave us on like access to like all the brand documentation and everything that we needed in their immense knowledge about our brand, and then they translated these brand into generative AI, right? Like I still remember the day when we were still working on like little POCs, like little like things here and there. We're creating a full campaign for Photoshop. And we had one of our senior writers and me, and we were like, prompting for that. And I remember that, we wrote a prompt, and one of the headlines that came through was like, "Sweeten every shot with Photoshop." And we're like, "Damn, that's good." Like, so it was like we had some really cool moments where like, collaborating with our studio team and our creative team, we kind of proved that generative AI could like write on brand and be creative and, write really good stuff. So these two teams, very important, right? And then once we had those two teams and we had these brand guidelines in a generative, in a way that generative AI could use them, we start creating things like I just told you about. We created like a Photoshop campaign, for example, right? But nothing would go out without review and approval, right? So initially the creatives were creating things, but then once we moved it into someone in Dana's team, like let's say Sushmitha, for example, then anything Sushmitha would create then would go through a review and approval process where someone from studio or for the agency would review it before it went out, right? So it's very important. We had lots of guardrails here, right? But they might sound like super restrictive, but again, they were not. Like it was, I think because everyone was motivated, right? I think the review and approval process, I don't think never felt to anyone like a huge burden or a huge like wall. I think we all understood and I think work really well on it. It's also a matter of the tool that we have that allows you to do it all in the tool. So, and so yeah, you start creating some things, some marketing materials. We started with email, we moved into Meta, and then display, right? And throughout that process, we did realize that our marketers needed some training, right? So, some of them were very proficient with prompting. Like right off the bat, they're like, "I get this. Like I've been writing a million creative briefs in my entire career. A prompt is not very different than that, right?" But some of them really struggled, right? And so we developed training materials for them. Our studio team developed training materials for them. Like we have a beautiful, like I would say, training on like, where it's like this is on brand, this is not on brand. This headline is on brand, this headline is not on brand. This image is on brand, this image is not on brand, right? Really to show marketers like what's brand, what's not brand. And one thing that's been incredible is when we first started this journey, again, going back to that first meeting, I think our biggest concern was, are marketers able to understand the brand as well as a creative? And I would say, creatives will always have a leg up on that because, that's their career, that's their profession. But it's been really interesting to see that our marketers, because they see these brand guidelines, because they received this training, because, the tool that we use in particular has brand checks and that highlights things for them that might be off brand. Like, they've become so proficient in our brand. They understand the brand. I think they can see things now and they're like, oh, that's not on brand. I can, and I'm not even a marketer. So it's pretty cool, like how we have sort of kind of democratized the knowledge of the brand within the company. And number six, I would say all of this should be monitored, right? As you're putting content out in the world that's been generated with generative AI, reviewed and approved, you need to make sure that it's still performing at least as well as before, right? It should be performing better if you're creating multiple variations, which you should be, by leveraging generative AI, but monitor performance, right? And also not just the performance of the assets itself, but also make sure that your employees are happy, right? Like for marketers, for example, for some of them, it might be quite a bit of a shift to be like, well, I used to just brief and now I have to create, right? So like, I think you have to keep that in mind, right? For creatives, it might be a little concerning for them too, right? So I think that it's just very important to kind of make sure you're monitoring things, that you're providing people with help, with leadership, right? Very important. And then finally, I would say step seven is, once you've had this core team of marketers, core team of creatives they've used generative AI for months now. You can start to, you can leverage them as like a center of excellence for Gen AI and just scale that throughout your organization, right? Like today, when we need to bring somebody, when a certain team wants to start leveraging our generative AI tool, like we can count on, people from Dana's team, for example, to help them, or Aloke's team to help them. So it's just very, very important you can certainly leverage that team to scale. So hopefully that roadmap helps you guys. And finally, the last thing I wanted to mention is the story that we've told you guys here is a part of, a part of a much larger story about Adobe, leveraging Gen AI for a marketing organization and building this Gen AI tool called Generative for Performance Marketing. And we wrote a white paper that's right here, and this is the QR code for it. I wrote it in collaboration with Dana, with Alok, with a lot of other people in GMO. And it has a lot of really interesting, I think, information, and it's already due for some pretty major revamps. It was published in September. It's already outdated because I think we're moving really fast. So we're planning on updating this, especially for Adobe Summit, which is going to be in March. So stay tuned, read this version, and then read the next version too. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jeremy, for the opportunity to present this to the eMarketer audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, Alok, Dana, and Luiz, thank you so much for sharing these great insights. I really appreciated personally hearing how you're using your own AI tools internally, eating your own dog food, and your points about using AI for analysis and optimization rather than just content creation, and the change management aspect you highlighted is crucial, but it's often overlooked, right? So we've got quite a few questions, so let's get straight into the Q&A. This is actually for Luiz. I think probably best. With so many Gen AI tools on the market, it's somewhat overwhelming for people. What should we be looking for to select the right tool for our company? And I think it's probably more complex than just looking for the Adobe logo in the corner, right?
It is, yeah. Well, we have been very thoughtful about this. So, okay, I would say, having been a part of this for so long and now working with a lot of our customers as well, I would say, probably let me start with the most important one in my opinion, right? If you are an enterprise organization, it means that your brand is very valuable to you. right? So brand guardrails are very, very important, I think. Um, Generative AI, one of the most amazing things about generative AI is that it is non-deterministic. Like, generative AI can take a lot of different types of input, which is really interesting. But the problem is that it is non-deterministic. So it can give you like really, like things that, are not really on brand to you, right? So anyone can go into a generative AI tool and say, write me uh, like a million subject lines. It will, but very quickly. But those are not going to be on your brand. Those are probably not going to represent your product correctly, right? Like, so a generative AI tool that has the brand at the center, right? And also that has, and that means both like a language model that can speak in your brand voice, but also a like a some form of brand check. So whoever's creating the content can be alerted and say, "Hey, this is not quite there." And also, a review and approval process built into it, right? I think that a generative AI tool that's built and used in isolation is not going to be effective. So I would say the most important thing here when you're picking a generative AI tool would be, does this create branded content that I can control? And does this allow me to do some form of review and approval in the tool? I would say that.
So we have another question. Maybe Dana, this is a good one to start you off with. And somebody said that this is a grim question. I don't think this is actually a grim question. Will these emerging Gen AI systems, let's say, transform agency headcount in the brand creative journey? Or do you see agencies taking on more upstream responsibilities like ideation? I mean, certainly every time there's any new tool set that is launched, it leads to more jobs in some areas and less in others. But do you at Adobe have a bit of a POV on that?
For us, it hasn't changed the need for our agency partner at all because we're able to create even more content. So there are more reviews. And yes, we still use them for ideation. There are some things that we still, loop them in on ahead of time. So for us, I don't really see the relationship shrinking. I see it expanding.
Yeah, Dana, if I might interject here, like I would say just two things. So one is actually like someone from, so I've been working very closely with Dana's team, and one day we had a meeting with our agency that's doing the review and approval for us, and the way I started the meeting, I was like, so the agency created a campaign for us for Acrobat, Adobe Acrobat. Hopefully, you guys are all familiar with, and the headline that the agency created was connect the docs, right? Because the feature that we're highlighting was like a review. And I was like, and I started the meeting and I was like, who created that headline? Because that headline is just incredible, right? And as much as I think generative AI is incredible, and I've seen generative AI produce some really fun and awesome headlines, I think that the need for like human creativity will never go away, ever, right? Um, but the thing that we've observing, even at Adobe, right, is I sort of course, the future is in the future, but to me, when people ask me that question, I've thought a lot about it and I've read a lot about it in the past. And to me, I believe that generative AI, when it comes to content creation, I think generative AI is going to have the same effect in the creative professions and marketing professions as Excel as spreadsheets had in finance and accounting. So in the 70s, when spreadsheets came up and were created, everyone thought like accountants and finance people are all going to lose their jobs because their jobs were literally to like do all those calculations manually by hand, day in, day out, right? And does anyone know an accountant these days? Like I have 10 friends who are accountants. So like there's plenty of people employed in the accounting and finance profession. And the reason for that is that as our ability to do these calculations became so much faster, so did the need for those calculations. Because why? because the number of like the government was like, well, you can calculate things faster. So let me just add a lot more complexity to all of these laws, right? So as our ability to calculate increased, so did the complexity of the regulations and things that we needed to follow in finance and accounting. And as you guys might know, there's plenty of people. Like the number of accountants and finance people being hired like never went down, right? And I think it's going to be very similar with generative AI, because as our ability to produce more content just scales, just increases, so will our need for content, right? It's going to be, it's already this never ending like thing that you cannot reach, and it's going to just get worse and worse and worse, right? In terms of the demand for content. So I sincerely do not believe the sort of doom and gloom perspective from generative AI. Just wanted to say that, Jeremy.
That's a really good point. I mean, I think Alok, this could be a good question for you, and it touches on the fact that there are new roles that are being created and things that we can spend more time on than before, like analysis. So you mentioned how you apply Gen AI in tagging for A/B testing. Do you also incorporate this into your pre-campaign ad and content testing?
We don't do it in the pre-campaign testing. What we do is we get these attributes, we understand which attributes are driving performance for a particular ad, and then use that to drive the hypothesis, and then we essentially use that to generate new ads, and then put that live, let's say on Meta or display, and then get the data back. So that's the full loop. Sometimes we test in small amounts, like the example I gave you was a clean A/B test, and sometimes we just launch the creative. So we it's I think we've covered this quite a bit, but the need and scale for content is so high. As long as you're using the data and the insights to generate new creatives, and you're learning from that, and you're understanding what is the upside you're getting for that, you don't necessarily need a lot of pre-testing. We're talking about like display ads, Facebook ads. You don't need a lot of pre-testing.
And I think we have time for one more. This is a good one, I think. What advice can you offer to a team that is struggling to secure that executive level buy-in for adoption of Gen AI? How do you demonstrate its potential value to your organization, particularly when you haven't executed it yet inside that org? Any takers?
I can start and then and have Louise add on. But so I think it starts at building the business case, right? At the end of the day, each organization has their own challenges. We talked a lot about Adobe's challenges in terms of we have 70, 80 different languages, so many different products that we need to publish content in for email and for paid media. That's scale of content and velocity of content and time to market was our biggest challenge. And we're proving out that generative AI can help with that as well as drive high ROI. Um, Different organizations might have different challenges. So I would say start with what challenges do you have, and then build a business case from that. Once you build that business case of like why you need generative AI, then certainly building the small squad motions that Louise and Dana talked about, small teams with marketers, with creative professionals, with analysts and data scientists, like that's the squad that can help solve these problems and then prove the business case. You start with the business case, you prove the business case small, get the executive buy-in, and then roll it. Yeah.
No, that's a really great takeaway there. But wish we had more time. Alok, Dana, Louise, thank you so much for this great content and answering all these questions from our audience. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And before we wrap up, let me just take a moment to tell you about eMarketer's media channel. We've got a lot going on. Visit emarketer.com to register for upcoming live analyst and tech talk webinars and sign up for our newsletters. Don't forget to tune in to Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast, which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. Keep an eye on your email for the link to today's playback, and of course, feel free to contact us if you have any other questions. Thank you all for your time, and thanks again to Alok, Dana, and Louise, the team at Adobe, and our eMarketer studio team behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.